Many Zayos still to this day claim that the seventh was the actual genocide that happened and everything that followed after was not a genocide. As cynical as it is to paint a massacre as genocide, what they're ultimately doing and what they're ultimately hoping for is the victimization of the ones who are carrying out the oppression. They will claim that the reason the seventh happened was on no grounds other than the fact that Israel is a Jewish state, and the massacre happened on no other grounds than the fact that homos only wanted to get rid of Jewish people. Of course, this notion relies on the idea that there is no material reality for why the seventh happened. The material reality being 2 million people are inside of an open-air concentration camp and they've been denied basic human rights for over 75 years. That is the basic material reality that is not being contextualized and that is being forgotten. Therefore, to paint the attempt of breaking out of this concentration camp as an act of genocide can only be described as a cynical idea. So what is a genocide? I will go through the UN Convention and show you how it was prosecuted in the past by showing you a document of the ICC's first prosecution of genocide, the document being called the ICC's first encounter with the crime of genocide, the case against al-Bashir, who was the president of Sudan. So let's look at the UN Convention on the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide, and here we're going to look at Article 2, but remember that the most important thing when we want to prosecute a person or a country for genocide is the intent. The intention is the most important part. Whether that act and that violence was carried out with the intention of destroying in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. So these are listed with 5 points, and I'll go through them. We start with A, members of the group. Now, how does that look in Gaza right now? According to the Lancet study, we have over 186,000, and the Lancet study is not up to date anymore, so we have to assume it's over 186,000. My assumption is it is even the 186,000 would be an underestimate because you cannot go a full year while massacring civilians daily and not have it at least be 200,000. That is my opinion, but according to the Lancet study, it is over 186,000. So members of the group, we already have that. And by the way, it does not matter the amount. The amount, it does not matter when we want to prove intent, okay? So that's one thing to keep in mind. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. We have thousands and thousands of Gazans under the rubble without access to healthcare facilities, without access to basic food and water. This is causing both mental and bodily harm to a population of 2 million, facing also famine. And this is, the famine part is now also going to be coming in the next point. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. What does this mean? That means a condition of life that is set and systematically placed upon a group of people to deliberately destroy them. How does this look in Gaza? Well, cutting off water, cutting off electricity, cutting off fuel, cutting off food supply, and cutting off aid. You're creating conditions systematically through Israeli state to prevent the access to healthcare, prevent the access to food, prevent the access to electricity, and prevent the access to medical supply. All of this, compounded on a population of 2 million who are already facing famine as we speak, is a deliberate infliction of conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. It fits the bill perfectly. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. How can we describe D? The lack of medical supply means that people cannot give birth. Women cannot give birth in a safe environment. These are measures intended to prevent births. And also the environment that is caused around them, the famine, the destruction, the bombing of civilian infrastructure makes it extremely difficult for people to give birth. Outright impossible, may I say. So this one also fits the bill. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Now we don't have forcibly transferring children from Gaza into Israeli parents. But remember that only one of these points, if it was carried out with the intention, would prove genocide, okay? Now, usually in the ICC, the way the ICC does things, 1 point still wouldn't be enough. You would want at least 3 points or 2 points from this list. But legally speaking, 1 point should suffice, okay? And we already have 4. So the fact that the E one, the last one, is not 100% fit to the bill does not really matter, because all the 4 of them being fit to the bill is absolutely proof enough, especially for the ICC. So we have killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to the members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. 4 of those points from the 5 points are already fulfilled in Lhasa. And everybody who claims that 7th of October was the actual genocide, tell me, except for A and for B, where's the C? Where's the D? Did the deliberate inflicting on the group conditions of life to bring about its calculated physical destruction in whole or in part is an important point. In almost all genocides, we had, in for example, the H Coast, we had the systematic removal of Jewish people from their original homes into ghettos where they had no food supply, like lack of food supply, lack of medicine. We had that conditions of life that was imposed to destroy them. And this is why we can so clearly tell that the H Coast was an actual genocide. But where is that in the 7th? The Palestinians do not even have the ability to impose such a thing, even if they wanted to, because they don't have the political power, right? So that is another thing to keep in mind. But aside from that, I'll look at another one, the ICC's first encounter with the crime of genocide, the case against al-Bashir, because here's another important thing to keep in mind. Pattern of conduct. Pattern of conduct is very important because it does not mean that all massacres that were done with the intention to wipe out an entire people can be classified as a genocide, especially if it only happened in one day, right? You need a pattern of conduct, as in these patterns keep repeating. These patterns show intention. These patterns prove the intention of genocide. So here we have the term in context of which would include the initial act as an emerging pattern, okay? So the term, we'll look at the third point, notwithstanding the normal requirement for a mental element. A mental element is the intention to actually wipe out a group or destroy it in whole or in part, provided for in Article 30, and recognizing the knowledge of the circumstances will usually be addressed in proving genocidal intent. The appropriate requirement, if any, for a mental element regarding the circumstance will need to be decided by the court on a case-to-case basis, okay? So what is a pattern? What is a pattern of conduct? A pattern of conduct is, as I said, the repetition of a conduct, a military conduct that proves genocidal intent. In Gaza, for example, the active kabooming of hospitals over and over again in a pattern, which, by the way, when the UN decries with the first kabooming of the hospital that it is a war crime, that Israel ignores it and keeps doing it anyway, that is a clear example of pattern of conduct, as in Israel knows it's wrong, but it's still doing it day to day because it has a genocidal intent. So that is very important to consider. So now, taking all of this into consideration, everything that I told you until this point, was the 7th a genocide? No, absolutely not. There was no pattern of conduct, as in it did not continue after the 7th, now did it? And even if they wanted to, they could not, because they're not systematically strong enough to do it. And let's say for all intents and purposes that you are right, that Hummus really wants to wipe out all the apple Jews in the world, okay? Let's take your assumptions into consideration. Does that now make it okay to kaboom countless hospitals, to kaboom children? No, obviously not. It does not matter. It does not absolutely matter how terrible you think another group of people are when what you do is unalive children in the thousands, in the tens of thousands on a day-to-day basis. When that's what you're doing, it does not really matter how terrible you think another group are, because by action that you are committing, you are the actual worst one. You are actually the evil and depraved one, because you are the one who's kabooming children with the intention of kabooming children. That makes you the genocidal one. That makes you, via action, aside from any ideology, via action alone, the actual evil perpetrator in the scenario.